Paxinarian. Just an FYI, I don't think this episode is going to be, um, you know, it might be this one or it might be the next chapter. Wait a second, let me check. Okay. Okay, so I think it will be actually in the next chapter, but, you know. This is Paxinarian, or technically this book is called The Sheepfarmer's Daughter by Elizabeth Moon. I do not own this book, or technically my family owns this book, but I do not own, like, the story or anything, so, yeah. All your personal belongings you turn into the quartermaster. He'll put them in a bag with your name on it and store them in the treasury. We'll issue you training forms today, and if you want to keep your old clothes, they'll be stored too. Stammel turned to greet a gnarled, older man whose arms were full of burlap sacks. Ah, quartermaster. Good to see you. The man glared at the recruits. Another bunch of beginners. And how much sentimental trash have they brought to take up space in storage? Not so much. We've been on the road 8 days since the last pickup. Good. I'll need a clerk. Bosk will do it. Stammel gestured to Bosk, who came forward and took a handful of tags from the quartermaster. File 1, step up one at a time. Give your name and hand over your gear. Paxinarian stepped forward, unbuckling the belt on which her sheathed dagger hung. Bosk had already written out her tag and handed it to the quartermaster, who fastened it to the sack and waited for her contribution. She held out the belt, dagger, and the kerchief with her savings, 18 coppers, in it. Are you going to keep those clothes? He asked, eyeing her brother's trousers, which had slipped down her hips without the belt. Yes, sir. Amazing. Well, go get your uniform and bring your clothes back here. Quickly now. Paxinarian looked around to see where she should go. Stammel waved her toward a doorway on the left. There was a man and a woman presided there. A man and woman presided behind tables heaped with brown clothing. Pax strode quickly across the courtyard, hoping her trousers would stay up. Behind her, she heard Corin's nasty chuckle and whispered comment. When she reached the table, she saw stacks of plain brown tunics, socks, and low boots. The woman beckoned her and grinned. You're a tall one, right? Let's see. And she began measuring Pax with a length of knotted string, neck to waist, waist to knee, shoulder to elbow, to wrist. Here. She held out a tunic after rummaging in the pile. This should do well enough for now. Change. Paxinarian took off the tunic, stripped off her shirt and trousers, and pulled the tunic over her head. The cloth was not as scratchy as the wool that she was used to. The sleeves fell just short of her elbows, and the hem almost reached her knees. It felt more like a dress cut short than anything else. Try these boots, said the woman. Pax put on a pair of heavy brown socks and eased her feet into the boots. They were short. The woman offered a larger pair. These fit well. Here's a belt for you, and a sheath. You'll be issued the dagger later. The belt, like everything else, was plain brown. The buckle was iron. Paxinarian took her old clothing back to the quartermaster, feeling silly with the tunic rippling around her bare thighs. Oh, look at the pretty white legs she has. She was sure that mocking whisper was Corin or Jen's, and hated herself for blushing as she handed the clothes to be sacked away. But Stammel heard the whisper too. Corin, he said, who told you to talk in ranks? Paxinarian, returning to her place, dared not look at Corin's face as he replied, No one, Sergeant. Perhaps you need reminding that you're all to do as you're told, and nothing else? No, sir. Corin did not sound as confident as usual. But, sir, such a pretty sight. If a pair of legs can make you forget your duty, Corin, you'll have to be better taught. I don't care if the Marshal General of Gurd's Hall in Fin Panar walks through these lines stark naked and tweaks your beard. You pay attention to me, and not her. Is that clear? Yes, sir, Corin sounded sullen. But, no buts, growled Stammel. In less than an hour, Stammel's group of recruits was outfitted in the recruit uniform. They moved into one of the big barracks rooms with Bosk and Devlin, another corporal, assigning bunks. File leaders would rotate from week to week for the first month or so, said Devlin. He was taller and thinner than Bosk and looked as if he would smile more easily. Right now, he was not smiling at all. File leaders bunk here by the door, he went on. File seconds here, then thirds, fourths, and so on. You'll change your bunk as you change your place in the files. Now, each bunk has the same bedding, and this is how you will make it up. The corporals demonstrated, then pulled the bedding apart. Your turn. Get busy. As the recruits struggled with the bedding, they walked from place to place, explaining and criticizing. The long, stuffed straw pallet had to be patted into an even rectangle. Muslin sheet stretched tightly over it, and the brown wool blanket folded in one certain way at the foot. Paxnarian finally achieved an acceptable bunk, and stood beside it waiting for the others to finish. Her legs felt chilly and exposed, and she was hungry. Most of the others looked as uncomfortable as she felt. At last they were done. Corporal Devon went to fetch Stammel, and Bosk moved around the room, positioning recruits beside each bunk, ready for inspection. Stammel came to the door. Ready? Ready for inspection, sir, answered Bosk. Stammel began with the file leaders, checking their bunks first. Then he looked at his recruits, twitching his sleeve into place here, asking about the fit of the boots there. When he had made his way all around the room, he returned to the doorway. You'll present like this for inspections every morning before breakfast, he said, and at any other time it's ordered. You will receive your file positions here, and when that's changed, so that you'll go directly to your file position and formation in the yard. Immediately after inspection, you'll parade in the yard, and you'll march everywhere in formation, to eat, to drill, to work. You'll have a quarter glass after every morning to call morning call. You'll have a quarter glass after morning call to visit the jacks, dress, and make your bunks. I expect every one of you to be in place when I come in. He beckoned to Bosk and Devlin, and left the room. Most of the group stood still, but a few left their places and started for the door. Bosk returned, and the rash ones halted. And who told you that you were dismissed? They stared at their feet. Those of you out of position, stay here. Stay there. The rest of you are dismissed. Paxnarian gave silent thanks that she had not moved, and went quickly out to the yard. There she found the other recruit units drawing up information, and Stammel waiting. She aligned herself on the others, wondering what was happened to the unfortunates who had been held back. Beside and behind her the ranks filled. At last they were all in position. The corporals reported to Stammel, and after a moment he glanced at the other sergeants. Go ahead, Stammel, called someone from far down the row. Take yours in first. They were marched across the courtyard to a building with windows opening on the yard. Pax could smell the cooked meat and bread. There Stammel sent them in, one file at a time. Once inside, she was urged along by a private who directed her to the serving line. There she found a stack of bowls, another of trays, and a bin of blunted knives. She took a tray, bowl, spoon, and knife, and moved toward the impatient cooks. A dipper of some kind of stew went into the bowl, and half a loaf of bread, hunk of cheese, slab of salt beef, and an apple went on the tray. As she came off the server line, another private directed her to a table in one corner. Soon her file was seated along the bench, and the tables were filling in strict order. A cook brought over a large jug of water and a cup to their table. Pax took a tentative bite of stew. To her surprise, it was tasty, savory, with onions and vegetables. It had looked like a lot on her tray, but she found herself polishing the bowl with the last of her bread before she knew it. Well, said Stammel behind her, how do you like army food? Seems good enough to me, sir, said Sabin from the next table. You'll eat a lot of it. Stammel moved away. That first night in the barracks after so many nights on the road was horrible. It was stuffy, it smelled. Paxnarian jerked awake several times in alarm, only to find that she was safe in her bunk. Someone had walked past the doorway. It was neither light nor dark as the roadside, for the dark was thicker, an indoor darkness, and the light was clearly of human origin. Several people snored, and their snores echoed off the stone walls. She missed the comfort of the old shirt she usually slept in. The new night shift she'd been issued was scratchy. We're civilized, Stammel had said to those who protested against wearing a night shift. Besides, it'll be cold soon. Pax had scarcely fallen asleep after her last alarm when a terrible clangor broke out. Corporal Devlin with the triangle that announced morning call. Pax rolled out of her bunk and made for the jacks down the corridor, then back to the room to struggle with her bunk. She peeled off the night shift, hoping that Corin's eyes were occupied elsewhere. No one said anything. Everyone around her was as busy as she was. She unbraided her hair, combed it with the bone comb she wore looped in it, and rebraided it smoothly, wrapping the tip with a thread from her tunic. She didn't know what to do with the night shift. Bosk came to the door. Pax caught his eye, and he came forward. "What do I do with these?" "See that ledge? Fold it neatly and put it there." Bosk went around the room to tell the others. Pax tied her bootlaces, straightened her belt and empty sheath, and smoothed the sheet on her bunk one last time. Devlin came to the door. "Ready?" he asked Bosk. "As they will be." "Recruits, prepare for inspection," yelled Devlin. Paxtonarian stood where she thought she should be and stared straight ahead. Stamel entered the room and began on the other side. He found something wrong with each person. Blanket folded wrong, sheet crooked, pallet misshapen, boots laced unevenly, hair uncombed, tunic crooked, night shift folded wrong, dirty fingernails. Pax felt a stab of panic and almost looked at her hands. Untrimmed beard, messy bunk. He was only 2 bunks away, and Pax was sure she could not stand the suspense. Night shift under the bed. "Weren't you listening, recruit?" And then it was her turn. She felt herself begin to blush before he said a word. She heard, she did not look, him thump the bed. He looked at her from all sides, grunted, and finally said, "Tunics wrinkled in the back," and walked out. "Dismissed," said Bosk, and Paxtonarian headed for the yard, beginning to wonder why she'd gotten into this. She wondered even more in the next weeks. She enjoyed the marching drill, which kept them moving about in the wide fields in intricate patterns for several hours every morning and evening. It wasn't fighting, but it was soldierly and expected. What she didn't enjoy was the other work. Bed-making, cleaning, and dishwashing were among the things she'd left home to avoid. If she wanted to be a carpenter or a mason, she grumbled to herself one day while working on repairs on the stable wall, she'd have apprenticed herself to one. The others felt the same way. "We haven't even seen a sword yet," complained Effa. "I signed on to be a fighter, not drag rocks around all day." "Well, surely we'll get to that," said Sabin as he hoisted one of the despised rocks into place. "I mean, the place isn't full of workers, so they must have become fighters and gone to war." Corin gave a sneery laugh. "Fun reasoner you are. No, they'll keep us as laborers as long as they can, and then try to skimp on our training. As long as they count on fools like you to join every year, they don't care how many die." Paxtonarian snorted. "If we're fools for joining, what about you?" The others laughed, and Corin scowled, slamming a rock into wet mortar so it splattered them all. "I," he said, "already know how to use a sword. I don't have to worry." "You will if you don't get busy," said Bosk. They all wondered how long he'd been listening. The closest they came to anything that Paxtonarian recognized as weapons training was a hawk drill. Every day they spent 2 hours with the hawks, weighted wooden cylinders that looked somewhat like maces. "I know what you want," said Armsmaster Sigger as he supervised the drill. "You want swords, you think, and spears. Huh. You couldn't wield a sword for a quarter glass yet, none of you. Get that up, recruit. Higher, that's right. Thought you were strong, didn't you? And you're all as weak as newborn lambs. Look at you sweat." Sigger was a gnarly, dried-up old man who looked old enough to be anyone's grandfather. Pax had begun to doubt they would ever get to real weapons. Week after week they swung the hawks over, under, sideways, and then one day they arrived to find practice swords laid out. Wooden and blunted, but swords. Sigger stood behind the row of swords like a potter behind his wares. "Today," he said, "we'll find out who's making a warrior. File 1, come forward." Pax let her file out of formation. "All right, file leader, are you ready to face the sword today?" Pax took a deep breath of excitement. "Yes, Armsmaster." Sigurd glared at her. "Ha! Eager, are you? Your innocents are all too willing to shed your own blood." "Very well, pick up the first one in line. Yes, that one." Pax could not help grinning, a sword in her hand at last. She waggled it from side to side. "No!" roared Sigurd. "Don't play with it, fool! It's not a toy to show off with. A sword is to kill people with, nothing less." Paxtonarian blushed scarlet. "Now, hold it just like the hawk in position 1. Yes." Sigurd scooped up one of the other practice blades. "This is an infantry sword, short enough not to get in the way of formation. It's used to stab and slash. Now, file leader, the motions are the same as for hawk drill. Proceed." Pax was puzzled but willing, and began to move the sword through the remembered sequences. As she did, Sigurd's blade met hers, tapping it first lightly, then harder. Pax began to watch his blade, thinking back to Jonathan's sketchy lessons, and forgot all about the sequence of hawk drill. Excitement rose in her, and she began to swing the blade harder, trying to force Sigurd's blade aside. Suddenly, his sword was not there to be tapped. Instead, it rapped her sharply on the ribs. Ouch! She was startled, and having lost her rhythm, was whacked twice more before she regained it. Uncertain and a bit angry, she glared at Sigurd, who gave her a mocking smile. That was the flat of the blade, Yor said cheerfully. Next time it'll be the edge. Keep to the drill, recruit. Pax bit her lip, but returned to the drill pattern, meeting Sigur's blade with a crisp smack. He increased the pace, and she struggled to keep up, irritated by his smile and by the snide remarks of Corin behind her. Again, Sigurd rapped her ribs, sore now from the other blows, and Pax erupted furiously in wild strokes that hit nothing, until a sharp blow in the midsection knocked the wind out of her, and she dropped the sword and sprawled painfully on the ground. Corin laughed. Always a mistake to get angry, said Sigurd over her head. You've a lot to learn before trading killing blows. Catch your breath now. His voice chilled. As for you, recruit, that thinks it's funny, we'll have you next, if you please. Pax gasped a moment or two and clambered up. Still want to learn swordplay? Sigurd asked. Yes, sir. It's harder than it looks, though. Sigurd grinned. It always is, recruit. It always is. Now you've been bloodied, I want you to put on a bandana next time. He jerked his head toward a pile of white objects like cushions. Not you, he added as Corin moved toward the pile. I want to think if you think it's funny when I whack your ribs. Corin glared at him and snatched up a sword with practiced ease. Aha! An expert, is it? You've handled a blade before? Corin nodded. We'll see, then. You need not confine yourself to the hog drill if you think you can do more. But Corin began with the standard movements, holding his sword easily. I'd say you were used to a longer blade, recruit, commented Sigurd. Abruptly, Corin changed from drill pattern, and a complicated rattle of blade on blade resulted. Pax could not see just what had happened. Corin tried a quick thrust, but the short sword did not reach Sigurd, and Sigurd's blade rapped Corin's shoulder. Corin scowled and pressed his attack again, using his height and longer reach, but he could not touch the arm master, though kept up a running commentary. Taught by a fencing master, weren't you? You liked the thrust better than the slash. You handled that blade like you did most of your fighting in alleyways. It won't do for us. You might as well forget it, recruit, and start learning it right. And with that, Sigurd began a furious attack that forced Corin back and back and back around the practice ring, taking blow after blow, until Corin lost his grip and the sword flew out of his hand. Effa caught it in midair. Now, said Sigurd, the point of his sword at Corin's waist, it's quite as funny when it happens to you. Let's hear you laugh. Corin was white with rage, breathless, and sweaty. Sir, he said finally. Sigurd gave him a slight smile and nodded. Novices that have never handled a sword, them I expect to get drunk on the excitement and do something stupid. I thank them well for it. But those who claim to know something, go, wait for your turn again and recruit. Each of them went around with Sigurd without protection, and each received a complement of bruises. Then he showed them how to fasten the bandanas, the quilted canvas surcoat worn for weapons practice. Your turn again, Sigurd said to Pax. Ready? Are you sore enough? Pax grinned. I'm sore, sir, but I'm ready, I hope. You'd better be. Now start with the drill. This time, Pax handled the sword with more assurance and kept the cadence as even as she could. Better, admitted Sigurd. Painfully slow, but better. Speed it up now, just a little. Keep the rhythm. The blades clacked together again and again. Now a bit harder, not too much at once. The shock of contact was making Pax's hand tingle. Her arm began to tire. Sigurd shifted around her, and she had to turn and strike at the same time. An ache spread up her arm. Whack, whack. Sweat trickled down her face, stinging in her eyes. Sigurd moved the other way, and Pax turned with him, but she lost the rhythm. Quick as a snake's tongue, his blade tapped her ribs. Enough, he said. You're slowing down again. Give the blade to someone else and work with the hawks a while. Once they began drilling with wooden blades, they also began to learn other weapons. By the time they marched south, Sigurd said they would have a certain minimum proficiency with short sword, dagger, bow, and spear. The spear offered the most difficulty. As usual, it had seemed simple. Just thinking about it. A long pole with a sharp end to be poked at the enemy. No fancy strokes. Simple. Effective. Surely it would be easier than a sword. If nothing else, you could hang on to the thing with both hands. We don't use polearms often, said Stammel. We're a fast-moving, flexible infantry, and swords are better for that. But we do train with them, and we use them sometimes. So, first you'll learn to carry something that long without getting it all tangled up. Remember, these reeds we gathered last week, you were so curious about? Well, they've been drying in the store lofts, and you'll each take one. Soon, they were back in formation, each with a 12-foot reed in hand. Stammel had shown them how to hold the mock spears upright. Now he gave the command to move forward. 5 of the reeds tipped backwards. The butt on one tripped the recruit in front of the careless carrier. When he stumbled, his rings swung out of control and hit the fire leader on the head. Pick him up. Don't stop. Come on. You've got to hold them firmly. Don't let him waver. Keep in formation there. Stay in step or you'll trip each other. The weeds The reeds dipped and wavered as if in a windstorm, and as Stammel led the unit to the far side of the parade grounds. By the time he called a halt, most faces were red. Now you see what I meant. The only easy thing about spearwork is how easy it is to mess up the whole formation. If you ever see one of the heavy polearm companies like Count Vladis, you'll see how it should be done. Now, you've got to learn how to shift those things about together, or you'll all be tangled together. So just holding them upright will practice turning in place. He called for a right face. 2 recruits let their reeds lag behind them, and the tips bumped neighboring reeds. No! Hold them absolutely steady when you turn. Keep them straight. Try it again. After a dizzying few minutes of facing left, right, and about, and the unit could turn in place without any wavering of the reeds. Stammel wiped his face and glanced at the corporals. They were trying not to grin. Far across the parade grounds, he could see another unit practicing. It looked worse than his, he thought. Next step is the slope, he said. Don't move anything until I've explained. First off, you'll put the butt, a hand span, behind the right foot of the man in front of you. File leaders, that's an arm span in front of you. Then slowly tilt the reed back over your shoulder. You'll have to be careful not to let the butt slip forward. Then your left hand grips 2 spans below the right, and you lift it onto your shoulder. That gives enough clearance in front for marching. Don't let it swing free. Use your grip to hold the butt end down. Bosk, show them how to do it. Bosk came forward and took Paxnarian's reed from her hands. He held it upright and demonstrated the facing movements they had practiced. The end of the reed, far over his head, scarcely quivered when he turned. Then he loosened his grip and let the butt end slide toward the ground, tilting the reed as it slid so that it grounded an arm span in front of him. While his right hand steadied the shaft, his left hand reached below and lifted. The reed rose, keeping the same steep slant. When his left hand reached his right, he shifted the right quickly to the lower grip. That's the position you want, said Stammel. Now show him how to move with it. Bosk strode forward, the reed steady on his shoulder, not waving or dipping with his stride. When he turned, they could hear the whirl as the end of the reed sliced the air. He made a square, then returned the reed to an upright position and handed it back to Pax. I'm so sorry. Ready, said Stammel. Ground the butts. Paxnarian felt the length of reed quivering as she tried to let it slide slowly through her hands, aiming the butt somewhat ahead of her right foot. It bumped the ground. It's too close to you, said Bosk. Slide it out further. Pax slid the butt along the ground until Bosk nodded. Now tilt him back along your shoulders, said Stammel. Pax let the top of the reed fall back slowly. The butt came off the ground, but she pushed it back before anyone said anything. Some were not so lucky. Stammel and the corporals were yelling at those who let the reeds get out of control. At last, all were in the correct position. Left hands down, said Stammel, and lift, but keep it under control. No! He roared. Pax heard a smack and a yelp of pain as someone's reed landed on someone's head. Her own wavered as she tried to shift the grip of her left hand. Steady. Pax let her eyes slide sideways to see how others in the front rank were doing. Everyone seemed to be in the right position. Now, bring them back to vertical again. That's right, now slope them back. No, control it. Don't let it get away from you. They repeated this exercise again and again until the whole unit could shift the reeds from vertical to slope position without getting out of position. Paxnarian's arms ached, and her palms tingled unpleasantly where the reeds slid back and forth. We're going to march back with them at slope, said Stammel, and you'd best not look foolish as foolish as the other units either. Anyone who drops a reed. He scowled at them. They managed to make it back to the courtyard before the others without dropping anything but sweat. By the time the other units were in and halted, their own reeds were safely on the ground. Gradually, their weapon skills improved. They took fewer, but never no, thumps from Sigurd, and the spears seemed more manageable. After Pax took the skin off the inside of her left arm during archery practice, she learned to keep her elbow braced correctly. They all suffered a variety of lumps, cuts, and scrapes, but the only serious injury in Pax's unit was Mikel Falasson. who fell from a wall while working on repairs and broke both legs. He recovered, but with a bad limp, and eventually went to work in the armory. He was lucky not to lose either leg, said Devlin. That was as nasty a break as I have ever seen. Pax shuddered, remembering the white ends of bones sticking out. If there had been a marshal here, began Effa. Devlin interrupted. No, don't say that. Not here. Not in this company. Effa looked puzzled. But I thought, Duke, the Phelon's company recruited mostly guardsmen, doesn't it? Once it did, but not now. But when I joined and said I was a yeoman, Stammel said it was good. Sergeant Stammel, to you. Oh, yes, we're glad to get guardsmen, the more the better. But there'll be no marshals here, and no Grange or Barton. But why? Effa, leave it be. Arnie tapped her arm. It's not our concern. It was not in Effa's nature to leave be. She worried the question any time that the corporals and Stammel were not around, wondering why and why not, and trying to convert those, such as Paxenarian, Sabin, and Arnie, who seemed to her virtuous but unenlightened. Pax found these attempts at conversation annoying. I've got my own gods, she said finally, and that's enough for me. My family has followed the same gods for generations, and I won't change. Besides, however good a fighter Gerd was, he can't have turned into a god. That's not where gods come from. And she turned her back on Effa and walked off. Meanwhile, she, Sabin, and Vic discussed religion in a very different way, fascinated by each other's background. Now my family, said Sabin, we were horse nomads once, my father's father's grandfather. Now we raise cattle, but we still carry a bit of hoof with us, and dance under the forelock and tail at the weddings and funerals. Do you worship, horses? Asked Vic. No, of course not. We worship Thunder of Horses, the North Wind, and the Dark-Eyed Mare of Plenty. But my father says that's really the same as Aliana, the Lady of Peace. Then my uncle's family, I've seen them dance to Guthlak, the hunter. Yes, my father always goes home then. He doesn't approve. I should think not, Vic shivered. City boy, teased Pax. We gathered the sheep in from the wild hunt, but we know Guthalak has great power. I know that. It's what power? Brr. Now in my family we worship the High Lord, Alyana, Sertin, and Adian. Who are they? Asked Pax. Sertig is the maker. Surely you know of that. Craftsmen follow him. Adian is the namer, true namer, of all things. My father's a harper, and harpers deal much with names. You're a harper's son? Asked Sabin. Vic nodded. But you've no voice at all. True enough, said Vic, shrugging. And no skills of the harp either, though I had one in my hands as soon as I could pluck a string. My father tried to make a scribe of me, and I wrote as badly as I played, and got into trouble liking to fight. So, he looked at his hands, so it became wise for me to move away and make use of the skill I did have. Which is? Asked Sabin slyly. In an instant, Vic had turned, gotten his hold, and flipped Sabin onto his back, throwing down great lummoxes of cattle farmers for one. Sabin laughed and rolled back up into his sitting position. I see your point, he said cheerfully. But will it work against 1,000 southern spearmen? It won't have to. You and Pax will be up front, you lucky tall ones, and you can protect me. After several weeks of switching places information, they received their permanent assignments. Permanent until you do something stupid, Bosk said. Pax, to her delight, was a made file leader. She still had problems with Corn, who teased and pestered her whenever the corporals weren't around. But aside from that, she had returned to her earlier pleasure in being in an army. She did wish that brawling were not forbidden. She was sure she could flatten Corey and ached for a chance. But after the formal punishment of 3 recruits from Keffer's unit who had livened a dull rainy afternoon by starting a fight, she was determined to keep her temper. She did not want to lose her new position. One afternoon, a troop of soldiers in the Duke's colors rode up from the southeast and were passed by the gate guards into the courtyard. The 15 men, under command of a yellow-haired corporal, were immensely impressive to the recruits, and they knew it, swaggered accordingly. Get the quartermaster, the corporal ordered a recruit from another unit, and the recruit scurried away. Paxenarian, taking her turn at the cut and thrust practice with Seeger, was tempted to look and turn, but the armmaster brought her attention back with a thump on the ribs. When you're fighting, fight, he said grumpily. You'll be gazing around at everything on earth and heaven, and you'd be buzzard bait soon enough. Pax concentrated on trying to slash past his defenses, but the old man was more than a match for her, and talked on without a break as she grew more and more breathless. And now that's too wide a backswing. What did I tell you? See, your left side is open again. Somebody will plant a blade in there when you're careless. Quick, lass, quicker! You ought to be quicker, nor an old man like me. Look now, I give you an opening, wide as a barn door for thrust, and use the same wide cut. Stop now. Pax lowered her wooden blade, gasping for breath. You're strong enough, Seeger said, but strong's not the whole game. You've got to be quick, and you've got to think fast. Think as fast as you move. Now let's break the thrust stroke down to its parts again. He demonstrated, then had Pax go through the motions several times. Let's try that again. Don't stand flat-footed. You need to move. This time, practice seemed to go more smoothly, and at last Pax's blade slipped past to touch his side. Ah, he said, that's it. Twice more that afternoon she got a touch on him, and was rewarded with one of his rare smiles. But still you must be quicker, was his parting comment. So, that's today's chapter, I guess? I don't know. I don't know how well I'll be able to read these, especially because, like, it seems that my body hates me right now. And won't let me read these. So, yeah.